In the last video, we introduced 5 different forms of reinforcement, some of which are familiar to parents. Now, unless you're lucky enough to be bestowed with an innately angelic child, there are many areas of life where, as a parent, you're likely to use rewards and punishments to attempt to shape behavior. For example, parents sometimes reward kids for chores with allowance, or give kids a timeout for undesirable behaviors like talking back or violence. Do these things work? And if so, what works best? The answer to this isn't simple. Different things work for different behaviors, and it matters a lot how rewards and punishments are doled out. Kids aren't dumb. When we give out rewards and punishments, they're likely to learn a lot more than the parents intend to teach. For example, as we'll describe later, a firm spanking is quite likely to make some behaviors less likely in the short term, but the child will also come to associate the negative consequence not only with the behavior, but also with the person doing the punishment. If you've ever adopted a dog from the pound, you probably know what I'm talking about. Some adopted dogs are chronically fearful, or fear certain types of people like men or people with deep voices. Kids aren't that different. We can shape their behaviors with punishment, short term, but we also risk instilling fear and anxiety. For reasons like this, many parents prefer to reward positive behaviors rather than merely punish negative ones. Still, there isn't just one way to encourage positive behaviors or one way to punish. If you really want to know the state of the art in behavior modification, look no further than Las Vegas. Casinos have mastered the art of extracting cash from the pockets of patrons by leaning on the science of reinforcement learning. How? Well, think about a slot machine, one of the most addictive forms of gambling around. How do slot machines keep you playing? By using what behaviorists called a variable reinforcement schedule. To put this in context, let's consider all the options. One obvious but exceedingly impractical way to encourage a behavior is to reward it every time it occurs, to be consistent. This is called continuous reinforcement. Parenting books often hype the importance of consistency, but the problem with consistent reinforcement, beyond not being all that practical, is that children may come to see a behavior as only worthwhile if it's rewarded. For example, scientists debate whether we should pay children to read. Some argue that doing this will cause children to view reading as only worthwhile if a payment is likely. Others, on the other hand, think that paying kids to read may help them form good habits, which can take on a life of their own. Honestly, there's not a ton of solid science behind this particular question. What most experts recommend is setting up rewards that you view as good in and of themselves, like rewarding reading with special alone time for kids, like one-on-one trips to the library or a bookstore, or making a plan to watch popular movies like the Harry Potter series only after the child has read the books. Other reward schedules use so-called fixed reinforcement, where rewards occur either after a fixed amount of time, called fixed interval, or after a fixed number of repetitions of the behavior, called fixed ratio. Let's make this concrete with an example. Imagine you're one of B.F. Skinner's rats in a cage, and there's a lever that you can press to get a reward. On a fixed ratio, pushing the lever will cause food to be released every 30 pushes. So here, the rational thing to do is to try to push the lever exactly 30 times and no more. A fixed interval schedule is similar. Now you get a reward, say, every 30 seconds, so long as you push the lever at least once. Here you should expect very, very few lever presses, which is indeed what scientists have found. Just wait until you think somewhere around 30 seconds have passed and press once. Variable intervals aren't much better. Here, rewards come willy-nilly at random times, regardless of how many times you press. So here, rats will press the lever very, very little, though a little more than in a fixed interval schedule. By far the most effective way of encouraging a behavior is the variable ratio schedule, the one used by casinos, where you get a reward based on repeating a behavior, but the number of times you need to respond is random. Now, both rats and slot machine players go wild and pull the lever almost continuously without stop. We often hear other people tell new parents that the key to discipline is to be consistent. But as we're seeing, this isn't quite true. Being slightly random may be the best way to encourage positive behaviors. We reward happy moods with smiles, but maybe not when we're tired. We give hugs and kisses when our child is sweet to us or a friend, but maybe not every single time. Sometimes we choose specific rewards like treats for patience or hard work, but again, probably not in a systematic way. It turns out that being random comes fairly naturally to most of us. But besides encouraging positive behaviors, variable reinforcement schedules can also have disastrous results. And this is where that advice about being consistent rings true. Ideally, for negative behaviors, we'd like to practice something like extinction, cutting off rewards completely for disruptive, mean, or antagonizing behaviors. Consider every parent's best friend, whining, which one recent study claimed is biologically tailored to be the most annoying sound possible to human ears, worse than the scream of a table saw even. Every kid whines to some degree, and some amount of it is probably unavoidable no matter what we do. Still, our behaviors matter. Most parents know that if you give in to whining, it will only become more frequent in future. Very true. But possibly the very worst of all is to only give in sometimes, to resist 80% of the time, but then in a moment of weakness to give the child what he or she wants just to achieve a moment of peace. Worst of all is to first resist whining, then give in if it goes on and on and on, effectively teaching your child that only extremely persistent whining is effective. Although nothing but time can guarantee the end of a child's whining career, our best bet is extinction, being as close to 100% consistent in not rewarding whining and teaching kids to replace whining with other modes of request.